Welcome back, webheads, to the next episode of Spidey Swing-Bys. I'm your host, Christian Ashley, a systematic geekology, as we go through every appearance of Spider-Man by release order, starting today. Excuse me, not starting, but going today into Amazing Spider-Man number 10. This is a phenomenal issue, a very fun issue of some good stuff we'll get into along the way. But before we get there, and I made sure to check the correct times and dates for everything this time around, so sorry about that earlier. But this is Amazing Spider-Man 10. This was released in week 50 in 1963. The release date was December 9th, 1963. The story is The Enforcers. This is written by, and for the first time I can recall seeing these, I can't remember when Stan started doing it, but I do love when he gets these goofy little affectations in there. We have written by Smiling Stan Lee, penciled by Swingin' Steve Ditko, and lettered by Sparklin' Sam Rosen. Now, unfortunately, not everyone else was credited that way. Ditko did ink. It's also edited by Stan Lee. This is one of the fun parts of early Marvel is seeing these Lee-isms here. And just how he brings some stuff out is that massive introvert there is this is not a Kirby idea. This is not a Ditko idea. This is Stanley through and through, just having fun. And at a time when not all of these people would have been credited. So hats off to him. He's not a perfect boss by any stretch of the imagination. Look into some of the stuff he did there with Ditko and Kirby. But for the time, for who he was, Stan was pretty good at crediting some people. So, what else was happening in Marvel this month? Well, besides Amazing Spider-Man, we go into Journey into Mystery 101, where we have Zarko, the Tomorrow Man, coming to menace Thor as Loki schemes to get rid of his brother for good. We have some time travel shenanigans going on there. It's kind of a proto-Kang in some response. Is Zarko, obviously Kang, a lot more popular, a lot better of a character, but Zarko, he's fine enough as it is. Then we go from there to Tales to Astonish 53, where Giant Man and the Wasp are once again forced to fight against the machinations of the Porcupine as he returns for revenge for defeating him the last time. An okay issue. Then we have Fantastic Four 24, which is honestly, in my opinion, one of the worst of the Lee Kirby era, where we have the infant Terrible raging in the city, forcing the Fantastic Four to stop the child, as actually kind of, in some respects, something that would happen later on in Star Trek. We get the really powerful child that has to be reined in by parents along the way. So, is it the worst issue of Fantastic Four? No, but is it the best? Definitely nowhere close. And from there, we go to Strange Tales 118 as we see the wizard deciding that in order to stop his arch enemy, the Torch, which thank God they changed that to Reed later on, he's going to go ruin his reputation by masquerading as him and causing people to think the Torch is committing crimes. While also we have Doctor Strange working to exorcise possessed people in a Bavarian town. An okay Strange backup, an okay Torch story, especially for Strange Tales. And finally, we have Tales of Suspense 51, where the Scarecrow appears for the first time. You know, that big Iron Man villain, Scarecrow, who Tony has always been afraid does actually for the time have a pretty decent plan to blackmail Tony Stark, which forces Iron Man to stop the vile villain. So that's what was happening in Marvel in the year of our Lord 1963 in this specific month of December. But what else was going on here? Well, my good friends, we have Amazing Spider-Man number 10, where we are introduced to the Enforcers. Now, I probably, oh, why are you doing that to me? There we go. Should have added that image here again, which I did not. So, Amazing Spider-Man 10. Let's cycle through those images one more time as we get into the story proper. It starts off in media res as we see the big man here leading his group to try and steal from this location here. And he's hanging on one of the poles for flagpole, as normal people would call it. And Spider-Man is about to take him down as the police are trying to get him, but he's hanging by a cable from a helicopter. And Spider-Man seeing that this has happened, uses his webbing in a very clever way to propel himself upward. But as he's unable to stop himself, even if his spider sense were to go off, he is attacked with this kind of gas that messes with his ability to kind of see straight, and he falls, plummets down towards the earth as we see the big man uh, very in some ways drawn very well sometimes, and in one of these panels not so much, but he's trying to make a big name for himself, and one of the ways he's doing so is to take down Spider-Man, who is someone who's gone after organized crime before, um, and in the process of this, uh, the big man decides that he's going to be the one to take over the criminal underground, and he's now going to be the head of the crime syndicate. We'll get the mafia along the way, along with the cover of the ones that are obviously the mafia, but instead of wanting the mafia to go after them since they are still active in New York City, Stan and Steve would create the mafia along the way. I actually can't remember when the mafia is officially named, so it actually might even be later than that. So we are then introduced to the enforcers as they showcase their powers. We see Fancy Dan, though small, his footwork is so fast and dazzling that no one can lay a hand on him where he performs little odd jobs for me, such as this, as he takes down these much larger men. We are then introduced to the Ox. Early Marvel. Where people try to beat him up. He's just eating like this little apple or something and just whacks him in the head. And of course, who could forget Montana, the third enforcer, who has a rope that beats gun because this is comics, and they're able to thwart these evil mafiosos and take over their organization. So these are our villains. The big man, his costume's a little messed up at times, but for the most part, he's a credible enough threat. And the enforcers, in my opinion, are some of the lamest villains Spider-Man has ever fought. They provide next to no physical threat to him. Only in numbers do they beat him, and even then, it's just like I find it very hard to think that they're a capable threat. So it goes over from there to Forest Hills Hospital, where Peter Parker is still worrying about his Aunt May. And who else should be there but Flash and Liz, who Liz has heard about Aunt May's illness and dragged Flash along to go visit her, which, hey, compared to where we started off with these two, even though Flash is kind of being tsundere about it, um, is a huge accomplishment and shows that they're mellowing down a little bit. And that's one of the best parts of Peter's supporting cast. It's like, hey, these start off as like tremendous jerks as fellow students. But over time, they learn a little bit more who Peter is, what he's capable of, and they try and help him out. And they're doing a really sweet thing that Betty did last issue in visiting Aunt May, which is really good uh, for developing their characters and showing Peter that they care too. But the doctor comes in and says, "Hey, we've noticed that she needs a blood transfusion, and his blood type might be the one to help her out. They, our family, it's certainly possible they have the same blood type, but Peter is scared because of how his blood has been messed with, tainted perhaps by the radioactive spider bite. Would this be a threat to Aunt May if he gave her blood, if he's a match?" And Liz and Flash obviously don't understand this, so it's like, "Hey, it's your own aunt. Why don't you do this?" And Flash, being Flash, has to make fun of Peter, and it asks him if he's scared of a needle, which kind of makes sense for Peter's character according to them. But Peter, sensing that, hey, someone has to do this, I'm going to do it. And this has huge repercussions for Aunt May, by the way, as time goes on. But for the moment, it seems to have worked. And Peter is able to help her out and given her the blood that she needs. And she seems to have started making a recovery, and enough to where she's able to leave the hospital and go out with the neighbors they've never mentioned before, the Abbotts. I'm fairly certain they haven't been brought up before, to go on a trip to Florida, which would have been nice if they had done that earlier when Peter needed pics of the lizard. But meanwhile, in the midst of that, the enforcers and the big man are trying to make their way into the criminal underworld, making even bigger scores to make some money along the way. But they're not the only one noticing their actions. There's a certain J. Jonah Jameson who, as the cops have managed to get some of the people working with them under custody, try to get more information. Jameson is convinced that Spider-Man is the one you should be going after. He must be mixed up in all this somehow. And the cops are like, hey, look, like, Jameson, why don't you forget your personal feud with Spider-Man and use the power of your paper to help us nab the big man and ask your readers to report anything suspicious? But Jameson says, as he's chomping on that cigar, as he always does, nonsense. There is no big man. Nobody's ever seen him and told about it. Spider-Man invented such a character to throw everyone off the track. Oh, the bounds and leaps this man goes through will never stop being amusing to me. And of course, as we get to the Daily Bugle, we see Jameson accosting a character I don't think has ever appeared before until today. Oh, it's surprising. I wonder who the big man is. It could be anyone. But talking to Foswell, this Frederick Foswell, this man right here, um, he's demanding that he gets, more articles about how Big Man is Spider-Man. And Foswell reminds Jonah, it's like, hey, like, you did that last month with Electro, and if you make those accusations again, people are going to stop buying the paper because they're not going to believe what you have to say. But Jameson threatens him, and you kind of get the sense of, oh, well, I'm only really doing this because you're my boss, and I don't believe in what you're doing. He even talks with Betty for a little bit, um, who then leaves the Bugle behind, and she ends up finding the enforcers. And we see for the first time that what she was worried about last issue has come to fruition here. She has paid off a loan, but according to Fancy Dan here, she hasn't paid off the interest, which got doubled. So Peter happens to be passing by, sees him there, uh, intervenes, but Ox gets around him. Obviously, he can break out of it any time, but to preserve his secret identity, he stops, um, gets accosted by the enforcers there, but Betty is afraid to tell Peter the truth because she doesn't want him to think bad of her. And even if he were somehow to actually think that, hey, I could do something about this, she doesn't want him to get hurt because he's just poor, puny little Parker. What could he possibly do in this scenario? So Peter notices the punk that had pointed Betty out to the enforcers, grabs him by his webbing, blinds him for a bit with the webbing, then later on brings this very intelligent, I will say, and I mean that with wholeheartedness, uh, pretending that the crook is trapped in a spider web and there's a giant spider there under Spider-Man's commands because they don't know he can't talk to spiders. But wouldn't your brain naturally think, well, if he's Spider-Man, what if he could? And then, oh no, you've got this giant spider hidden in shadows over there. So the crook gives up the big man's location, excuse me, the enforcer's location. So Spider-Man goes after them, fights them for a little bit. Ox gets a hit in or two. The rest do as well, but obviously they're nowhere near as strong. The lights go out in the midst of the fight, and Peter sees that J. Jonah Jameson is nearby, and he wonders, could the big man be Jameson? I mean, he'd have to be smart, someone who has a lot of money, someone who knows what's going on. But even he can't bring himself to think it's Jonah just yet. So Peter tries to call Betty later on just to check up on her. She's still upset and doesn't want him to like know about the secret side of herself that maybe would think bad about her. And she just thinks like maybe the only way out of here is for me to leave. And she talks to him briefly, but just lies to him and says she'll talk to him tomorrow. And has left completely because her job isn't there, and Jameson's trying to hire a new secretary, which of course Peter is very upset at because his blossoming relationship with her is becoming a thing. He doesn't want to see harm come to her in any way, shape, or form. So he's talks to Frederick Foswell for a little bit and about what Jameson is doing. He says, hey, I don't even believe what Jameson is doing, but I'd say that Peter Rabbit was the big man if Jameson told him to, because that's his job. So we see that poor Foswell, of course, he couldn't possibly be anything more than what he is. It'd be impossible for this to happen. So Peter is going about in his room, like pacing back and forth, half in his costume, half out. Like, what is he supposed to be doing? And he decides, as Spider Man, he's going to break up this criminal syndicate. But on the next day at school, as he's reading the paper looking quite smug, that he has figured out who the big man is. And Flash is making fun of him. And the other students are like, well, I mean, if anyone could, it was a good old bookworm Peter Parker. So, in another good move here for characterization's sake, the rest of the kids leave, but Flash stays behind to talk to Peter. And he actually wants him to like, hey, like, I'm scared for you. Like, if the enforcers find out who you are and like that who the big man is, they're going to do something to you. But Peter smugly and not understanding that Flash is really kind of looking out for him here, knows that he's capable of Spider-Man of fighting them. So this random crook here has figured out who Peter is, brings this information to the enforcers, who brings it to the big man, who recognizes the name Peter Parker. So could it be Jameson or could it be someone else? And we've gotten to the point that Spider-Man has even called police to tell them to watch out because he's going to bring the big man the justice today. And the enforcers put Peter inside a car and make fun of him for saying that he knows who the big man is. And he's still wrestling. Is it Jameson? Could it possibly be? Why would he go to crime? That's not who Jameson is. As prickly a man as he is, he can't think that it's Jameson. So what does Peter do? Is managed to get away in time so that he could become Spider-Man. He's supposed to be in a cell, breaks out of it, and then fights with the enforcers to try and not only take them out, but also figure out where the big man is. We see Fancy Dan and Montana and the Ox, like who are still no physical threat whatsoever, even to a young, weaker Peter Parker. Try and take him out, but he's just able to get away from the situation, take them out one by one, and brings the spider signal out, which tells the police, oh, that's where they are. So they go out to find Spider-Man. He continues brawling with the big man, the enforcers, and their crew. And it gets to the point where he is just able to completely and utterly overpower them. The police get involved and take him out, but the big man gets away. As Peter, still thinking it's possibly Jonah, goes to the Daily Bugle, and Jonah's thinking to himself about how he thinks that he's going to prove that Spider-Man is the mass leader of the crime syndicate that the enforcers are involved with, that he's the big man, and Peter is, of course, misreading him. We get Foswell coming in about how, of course, Spider-Man is the big man, but the police come in and say that they've found the big man already, as Peter's sitting stuck to the wall in suspense on the other side. They don't know he's there. They reveal that Frederick Foswell, the nebbish little reporter guy who's just writing articles, it could possibly be him. Well, it is. And I found evidence in his car, found that he was using these special built-up shoes, an oversized padded jacket, and an amplifier to disguise his voice to be the big man. And Peter just blows his mind because he obviously never once would have considered, with all those things, that's a bit much. But at the same time, it's enough to make sense for why he's doing this. It's like he doesn't want to be a laughingstock. He wants to be someone who's respected. And of course, Jameson's freaking out because he'll be the laughingstock because, of course, he put all those Spider-Man as the big man reports out there. And it's even a member of his own staff that did this. So we get a nice little moment here with Jameson where everyone else is left. It's just him. He's talking out loud. Even Spider-Man is left, even though he never knew he was there to begin with. And we get this little soliloquy. Am I always to be thwarted, embarrassed, frustrated by Spider-Man? I hate that costume freak more than I've ever hated anyone before. I'll never be contented while he's free. All my life, I've been interested in one thing, and only one thing, making money. And yet, Spider Man risks his life day after day with no thought of reward. If a man like him is good, is a hero, then what am I? I can never respect myself while he lives. Spider Man represents everything that I'm not. He's brave, powerful, and unselfish. The truth is, I envy him. I, J. Jonah Jameson, millionaire, man of the world, civic leader, I'd give everything I own to be the man that he is. But I can never climb to his level. So all that remains for me is to try to tear him down because heaven help me, I'm jealous of him. That is excellent dialogue for character motivation that has helped define Jonah for years to come. I'm glad where Jonah is where he is now, where he and Peter are friends. But that doesn't happen without scenes like this, without knowing Jameson is jealous and he's scared because Spider-Man represents the things that he did not do with the power and responsibility that Jonah has. He could have been helping out more with his money. He could have been printing more facts out there. But Spider-Man has become a blind spot to him because we don't know who he is. And yet he's not getting any reward from this. So there has to be some angle. He's got to be just as bad as me, is what Jameson is thinking. But the truth is, and he knows, he's a hero. And Peter, on the other hand, has nothing from this experience. Like he doesn't know where Betty is. He's all he wants to do is help her, and Betty this whole time is freaking out because she has gone to Pennsylvania just to hide away from everything. And we end on this somber note. Yeah, the big man and the enforcers are behind bars, but Jameson's a wreck, Peter's a wreck, Betty is a wreck. This is well done as an issue. Actually, going over this, my initial score would have been an 8 out of 10, but actually going through this issue again, I'm bumping it up to an 8.5. This is how you bring the melodrama into Spider-Man all over the place of what's going on with Betty. What about Aunt May? Is she okay? What is Jameson's motivation for hating Spider-Man? Will Peter be respected by his peers? Will he be able to Spider-Man to stop the big man and the enforcers? This is classic early Spider-Man done extremely well. It's not my favorite ever. The enforcers are still a very big letdown as a villain. The big man, though, even though the drawings sometimes are messed up, like he's an effective, like intelligent source of villainy against for Peter to fight. I love that. I love the reveal of him being Frederick Foswell. As much as I made fun of it, it's a pretty good reveal. This is extremely well done, Spider-Man. 8.5 out of 10. You guys, you got to check this out. But to an even better issue, I give you what we'll be covering next week, which is The Amazing Spider-Man number 11, the long-awaited return of Doctor Octopus. This is where some stuff goes down. These are some excellent issues coming up. I mean, the Lee Ditko run is pretty dang good, but these are some pretty dang good issues right here. So if you want some information about what's going on with Betty, what's going on, what would Dr. Octopus do if he fights Spider-Man again, just check out. We're going to be covering it. So, excuse me. Guys, if you have any questions or anything, leave them down below. Please comment, like, share, subscribe. Sorry. Been recording a lot today. But yeah, you get a chance to just leave us a review. Let's see, not a review. This is a podcast. Leave a comment below. Let me know what you guys want me to focus on more. If there's anything I missed, I'd love to cover that stuff and make apologies for anything I skipped over. But until next time, webheads, see ya.